I really enjoyed your book, and I really enjoyed Sheldon, who is a really amazing character. So, how did you get the idea of such an amazing character?
Sheldon was a minor character in a previous manuscript that I had written, and I'd been thinking for a while about bringing him back. And when I moved to Norway with my wife and at the time my son, I was exploring different themes that I wanted to consider in my next book. And when the idea came of bringing Sheldon to Norway, it's something came together. And I think that I don't know if I so much came up with an idea for Sheldon so much as he evolved in my writing, and then came to have some values of his own that I wanted to explore.
So first, what gave you the wish to write? What was the first...
L'inspiration,
Yeah.
ça commence. I think from high school I started writing a little bit, but I didn't really try it until '96 when I was about 25. I'd studied at Sarah Lawrence College in New York, which is well known for creative writing, but I didn't study it. I was surrounded by it for a long time, and writing is very much part of the education. In '96 I moved to Switzerland, and I was going to study my doctorate. And I didn't know anyone. I had a very small apartment. I had no television, which helps, by the way, if you would like to either read or write, possibly think. And I started working on a story, and I realized very quickly that how little I knew about how to do it, but also that short stories weren't for me. It's not that I disliked them. It wasn't. It felt too much like an exercise rather than a journey, and so I wanted to delve into something. So my writing started in '96, and I finished my first novel in '98. The first manuscript anyway. A long bit of writing.
And so what kind of writer are you? Do you have a routine? Do you write every day?
I don't know what kind of writer I am, but in terms of how I go about it, when I was writing this book, my son had just been born, and I was working full-time, and so I would work on the weekends, usually get up around 5 or 6, and then try to work till about 11 or 12. So I'd get about 12 hours in, more or less, on the weekend. I'm a morning writer, not a night writer. Can't do it anymore. It's just not for me. I think morning creates that sort of dreamy conditions and the silence that I value. I don't think those are the things though that differentiate one writer from another too much. Saul Bellows stood on his head, but I'm not really sure that made any difference except for being a little silly. Dan Brown hangs from his ankles. I don't do either one.
And what kind of reader are you? Do you have a favorite author?
I would say that I'm not a current reader. In other words, in fact, until my book was published, I never gave any thought whatsoever to what was recently out. I never looked at any of the websites. I'd never heard of Goodreads till a few weeks ago. I consider I'm a personal reader. I like the way it used to be. I guess I'm very old-fashioned this way. I would go into a bookstore, find something that interested me, and I'd read it. I'm not a genre reader very much. I love science fiction, but I don't read it very much. And it varies. I mean, I have Don DeLillo's White Noise in my bag, which I read years ago, and I want to read again. I just finished Wonder Boys from Michael Chabon. This one came out in the '80s. That was mid-'90s. It doesn't. I just bought The Razor's Edge from Somerset Maugham, and maybe I'll read it next, maybe I won't. It's 100 years ago, so it doesn't really make much of a difference in that way. I go where the wind takes me. It's like sailing.
Okay. Norway is beautifully described in the book. So why Norway and not the US?
Well, there are two reasons. I mean, the first one is it was on my mind, and it's something I wanted to write about. The second reason is that bringing Sheldon to a place that's so unfamiliar is necessary for the story that I wanted to write. On the first one, since I'm not really a plot-driven writer, I do think about plot a lot, and I care about plot, and I'm sort of with John Irving on this one. I think, it really does matter if you're telling a story or not. It does seem to matter. But I'm not defined by it. So I have themes that I want to think about. In this case, I wanted to think about my grandparents' generation very much. I wanted to think about the relationship of that to patriotism in the United States, the changing ideas of patriotism, some of which have been very corrupted in the last decade or so. The Jewish experience in Europe, Jewish experience in Norway, because of my kids. I'm Jewish, my wife's not. These were themes, and in writing a book, I find, since it takes a year or two, or depending on the book, but I want to be surrounded by things that are on my mind, and I think that I can stay with for long enough to sustain my own interest. It might take you 3 days or a week or two to read the book, but it takes me years to write. So I need something that I can stay with for a while. So Norway was a place I wanted to explore and a relationship I wanted to understand.
Your book deals with the wars, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. How do you think it defines American fiction nowadays?
That's a big question. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I would say that it defines the American character. I'd say it defines the American conversation. The relationship of our general conversation about identity to how that ends up in art, I can't say. I mean, in some ways, it's a question you ask a professor of literature, not a writer.
Yeah.
And because it's the act of reflection on the catalog of work that I think gives you that insight. I don't think a writer knows that. But I would certainly say that our role in these wars and how they began, how they ended, under what conditions, the consequences to our soldiers coming back, our moral position, these things are essential. I mean, but I don't know many countries for which it's not essential. It's essential for France. You can't really understand France until you understand what happened during either that war, Algeria, or etc. It's part of it's part of your national character and philosophical dialogue about yourself and who you are. I think for a writer to completely ignore that would be a bit awkward, unless you want to create something that is somehow truly fantasy, which is perfectly legitimate. In which case, that's fine.
Your novel can be seen as a kind of social drama and also a thriller. So how did you decide to mix both?
Social drama and
a thriller.
Oh, thriller. I think the social drama came first, or in some ways, it's almost a family drama. I've written basically three manuscripts, and my first one was just a mess. It's a good idea, but it was a mess. But I was learning. It's normal, and I don't have any problem with that at all, nor admitting it. My second one had some good stuff in it, but it was too ambitious for my skills, and so that's not going to see the light of day either. But then I rewrote that one and other things. This one, I really told myself I wanted to have a much more clear structure. So in some ways, it's not so much plot-driven or drama-driven, it's author-driven, right? Which is sometimes you do what you can. And I wanted something that had a much more of a clear and linear storyline at first. I think back on that line in the movie Chinatown. I don't know if you saw it with Jack Nicholson. But at any rate, at one point he's a private investigator, he's told, just find the girl.
Yeah.
So in this case, just save the boy.
Yeah.
On the other hand, in some ways it wasn't satisfying enough though, as a writer. And so the story works in two different directions. So the structure is parallels but moving in the opposite direction. So one story is over a couple of days moving forward, but the other one goes backwards in time. And so the tricky part in terms of structure was making sure that the two stories, one moving forward in time, the other moving backwards in time, one was not distracting for the other, but actually helped the main story move forward. And that was in a sense the challenge. And so and Sheldon's sort of dreaminess, whether it's talking to ghosts or going on, or his memories, or the way he talks to himself or the boy or other, gave me some means of doing that.
So at the end, can we talk of redemption for Sheldon?
I don't know. I think we can talk about. I don't think we should talk about the end too much, but I don't think there's really redemption there. I think that the attempt to atone for what you believe your sins to be, to try to seeking forgiveness and receiving forgiveness are completely different. And I don't think for Sheldon there is any forgiveness to be received. There's no one to ask it from. And he doesn't want to be forgiven. What he wants to do is try to come to terms in some way with the decisions that he's made and the consequences that they've had. And in his talks with his friend Bill, which they're an opportunity to understand, for him to really come to terms with things he hasn't said to himself and admitted to himself over whatever it is, 40 years or 50 years. But I don't think there's really. I think it's in one way it's a very funny book. I mean, we sometimes forget that. I mean, there's a lot of comedy in this book, but to some extent, his story is ultimately a tragedy. But that becomes, in some ways, the source of the comedy, because I keep those two things very closely interrelated. It's not very Greek that way. I haven't separated them out. But I don't know if he's not seeking something because there's no father figure to ask it from, if that makes sense. He's not Catholic. He can't go to the confessional and receive, and because he wants to atone for what he's done, that he can be given absolution. It's not available to him.
And can we see Sheldon as an archetype of his generation?
I don't know. I mean, I guess, in some ways, I think he is a kind of story that exists from that generation, that does not exist, I'd say ours, but maybe it's yours and mine, I'm not sure yet. there's these stories exist in that generation, in this case of men. But I don't think he's an amalgamation. I don't think he's meant to be an archetype in some sort of Jungian sense. I don't think that's right. I think he's an individual who lived a life that I want us to be able to see, and he's a kind of life that is familiar enough to other people from that generation, but that has been hasn't been as noticed as much. And I think that's also where the Jewish element comes in as well. There are 500,000 Jewish men fighting in World War II just from the United States alone. But that isn't the image that we have in the post-World War II period. And so there is, he wasn't there, he was in Korea. But he's only a couple of years, so there's only a couple of years separating, it's 6 years, 5 years. And so in that way, I think he is an untold story from that generation rather than an archetype of it, which would have been a shorter answer, but I had to figure out what the answer was.
Can we say that there is a kind of frustration for not being able to act during the Second World War?
Yeah, I think there were a lot of young men, and certainly not just Jewish, but just in general of wanting to serve. It was a pretty clear-cut kind of war. We were right and they were wrong. That's pretty much the end of that conversation. And we weren't the first ones to be right. We waited a long time before we entered the war. Britain was right first, which shouldn't be forgotten, but it isn't forgotten. Sometimes Americans need to be reminded. But I think he felt a drive to be involved and it was an understanding of the difference between the Jewish experience in America versus the Jewish experience in Europe that was part of the source of his patriotism. And so he wanted to enact that, and which is why he went to Korea.
Yeah, patriotism is a very important theme also in the book. It seems to have changed a lot since Vietnam. And how would you explain this evolution?
Of patriotism?
Yeah, how would you... Harsh question.
The period of Vietnam in America was a time when received notions of patriotism were questioned, and in many ways legitimately questioned, by the younger generation. And it separated the idea of there are different ways of serving your community,
yeah.
Right? And it became it's sort of an old-fashioned notion to say, well, serving in the military is the only way to serve it. But I think patriotism is meant to do two things, and one of them I think is forgotten, which is one of them is it's a bit. Let me put it this way. There is an old-fashioned notion of patriotism that your country is your parent, which I don't like. Your country isn't your parent. Your country is your kid. At least that's how it should work in a democracy, And when I say it's your kid, I mean you protect it from harm and you teach it right from wrong. Both, all the time. That's the job. And, you don't decide with your children whether you're going to keep them from harm or teach them right. You have to do both. And sometimes, it's difficult. Don't play with it. Don't play with it. Don't play with it. Don't play. They hurt yourself. And we, and I think from Vietnam we've started to grow and improve and get smarter until something happened after September 11th where we got stupid again, and I think I know why. And I don't think I'm the only one who knows why. But we need to regain that notion that you have to do both jobs. And in America, it's become much more split these days, and really quite a childish discussion. that somehow, you know, one political party wants to defend us while the other one wants to. This is ridiculous. So you have to do both, but I think that we're in a period right now where we haven't entirely recovered a sense of what it means to be part of a community. So we're going through a very awkward time because patriotism has to be connected to a sense of community. And that sense of community in the United States, I think to some extent, I don't want to say we're losing it, but it's not, it's under threat from ourselves. You know, we are a house divided. So I'm disappointed. So I'll have to fix it.
And finally, do you have another book in?
I do. I just finished the first draft of my new one. And so, you know, my hope, but it might be premature, but I'd like to see it done before the Frankfurt Book Fair, which is 6 months from now or something like that. And I think it's possible. And, you know, it takes that long to go back and edit it, and, you know, line by line, word by word, figure out what it is I'm doing, what I want to say, and the rest of it, and also make sure the story comes together the way that I want. But yes, there will be another one. If anybody wants to publish it, yeah.